Salutations everyone, it is Matty here today with my review for Days Gone. A big thanks to PlayStation for providing the review copy way ahead of the game's launch, giving me ample time to dive in, get all the data, and deliver to you fine folks the final verdict. Days Gone releases exclusively on the PlayStation 4 on April 26th for the price tag of 60 big ones. Unlike pretty much any other PlayStation exclusive, Days Gone has been met with a degree of non-believers thanks to Sony not pushing the product much and the title itself suffering some delays. So, has Days Gone managed to surpass expectations? The short answer is no, not really, but it actually goes deeper than that. Allow me to explain. Hop on the review bike, let's ride along, starting off with the story. You play as Deacon St. John, a vet gone biker who is out in the shit, as the game frequently calls it, just trying to survive day in and day out. He is a guy who constantly finds himself lost in the past, refusing to move on and start life anew despite what all the people who surround him say. The core of all that, his wife, Sarah. As the game starts, she's put on a helicopter and presumably sent to her death despite Deacon trying to save her. The story picks up 2 years later as the world has evolved, but the player is dropped in and left to figure everything out for themselves. I actually quite enjoyed this narrative style, as it gave the universe a much more established feeling and made discovering more about it intriguing. Sadly, what there is to discover in the first half of the game really takes its time ramping up as you are piecemealed mission after mission, just little tiny details, some just being raw cutscenes spanning across multiple storylines, and when things are finally starting to click and coming together, the act swiftly concludes in exchange for a whole new set of brand new characters, thus padding out the ending segment far longer than it needed to be. Combo that with some insanely predictable plot twists along the way, and a cast of characters that have conversations that are as deep as a puddle since they simply cut one another off going, "Just forget it," or "Hey, can it?" before arriving to any remotely emotionally charged moments, thus in turn bringing us to a ride that feels almost as empty as its world. Deacon himself is arguably well-rounded actually, but incredibly flawed and headstrong to a borderline frustrating degree. He consistently contradicts himself, some of his personal philosophies that he swears by are broken, and honestly, he's sort of a douche without much good reason.
That business we were talking about, it's gonna take me a bit. I gotta go check on security at the border with Iron Butte. Check on the Rippers there, if you know what I mean.
No, Skizzo, I don't got a clue. Why don't you spell it out for me?
Nice try, smartass.
Supporting casts like Skizzo, Boozer, Ricky, Copeland, etc. all don't receive many strong looks to fully open up to Deacon and create some side characters worth caring about. Days Gone takes place in Oregon, the same location as the dev studio, and while it's certainly pretty during any weather and any time of the day, the content within it is equally as hollow as the storytelling. There's the main story, some marauder/ripper camps breaking into Nero checkpoints and infestation zones. More on that later, but the main story missions themselves revolve around one of 4 mission styles: bike chasing, kill X amount of people, eavesdropping, walk and talk from point A to point B, and that's it. You can see the inspiration taken from the likes of Ubisoft, Rockstar, Bethesda, and other Sony exclusives, all for the better, but also the worse. This is especially highlighted in the repetitive eavesdropping missions, which really just gave me flashbacks to the dark times of the Assassin's Creed franchise, where all I did was follow people and listen to their conversations for 30 hours straight. What's all the more infuriating is that Days Gone has some moments that really grip me. Hell, I'll go even to the length of saying that they are excellent, but there's so few and far between that it leaves me just wishing I loved this game more. The story wraps up in 30-ish hours, arguably 5 to 8 hours longer than it needed to be thanks to a slow start and a stretched finish, but when walking away from this tale, I couldn't help but think of one thing. There's going to be a legion of people who really dig this game, whether it's because the rest of Sony's first-party exclusives are so top tier that they find this underrated, or what's in the game is up their alley. For me, as a lover of anything post-apocalyptic, as you know based off the channel's history, I think it's safe to say I stood a strong chance as being more than accepting of its flaws if the universe was dope and the story was there and somewhat interesting. But the truth behind certain characters, the freakers, and such, all woefully underdelivered for me. Matty, that's just one part of the game, man. How about the gameplay? Is at least that fun for a post-apocalyptic game? Well, when it's running well, it can be alright. Yes, even after a large 16GB patch released mid-review period, Days Gone struggled to maintain a 30 FPS, dipping especially hard around Iron Mike's camp. When there weren't frame dips, areas would load in as you approach them, or textures would just fail to load in general. This is where I think the comparisons to other Sony exclusives will be made, because yeah, you can't tell a 10 out of 10 story like I feel The Last of Us is every time, and you can't have downright joyful, character represented gameplay like Spider-Man time in and time out. But each of those games had one thing in common: they came out polished. This one did not.
That's not what Tucker says. I guess when Leon and Alvarez took off with the camp's drugs, they forgot to cut you in. Is that about it? No. No. Clue me in on what you're thinking, man. I want to understand. You took what was left while the old woman wasn't looking?
Bugs frequently plagued my experience, whether it was audio not starting up, freakers falling through the ground, part of the map not loading and killing me, or just falling through the map in general. The list goes on, and really muddies the in-between of those stories and cutscenes mentioned earlier. There is also the natural issues baked into the gameplay, such as frequent load times being the most egregious offender. Approach mission marker, fade to black, cutscene, fade to black, gameplay, repeat. This is your cycle, especially in those aforementioned missions, where missions are just cutscenes. You're fading to black for a decent load screen every 5 minutes, and it gets ridiculous. It disrupts a potential flow that the narrative could have used as a springboard, but the tech just isn't there. When you are exploring the world, you'll find multiple camps, each with their own credit count, which is the game's currency, along with multiple shops such as merchants, mechanics, and bounty boards. You can earn credits by completing missions for said camp, or selling ears of the freakers along with meat that you collect from wild animals, but those ears of the freakers can be sold at the bounty board. As you earn more credits at a specific camp, you gain trust levels, which unlock new items to buy, whether it be weapons or bike parts for upgrades. What's neat is that each camp is its own entity, so you could have a level 2 trust at Iron Mike's, who has access to some upgrades I want, but then you can head back to Copeland's, whose trust is of a lower level at this point in time, and have limited access to their wares. Now, you don't get locked off from raising one in exchange for another, which I thought would have been cool, but I did like this touch to the gameplay because it gave me a feeling of separate communities and me doing my part for those separate communities being established in the game world. I mentioned the bike, which is integral to your journey in Days Gone. Hell, it's the core of the game. Everything from traveling to saving is linked to this bike, and yes, even hard saving. You have to manage your bike's fuel and repair it if it takes too much damage using scrap looted from the open world. On paper, this is a wonderful idea, and the execution is mostly there, I'll say, but some aspects do fall short. For example, fast travel. Fast traveling requires you to be near your bike, as well as having an adequate amount of fuel to reach your destination. What will happen often is you'll go through 2 to 3 loading screens, fast traveling from point to point to point dotted around your map until you're close enough to your destination to drive there. Fast traveling also uses fuel, so that's why you're fast traveling to so many different points, and the system ends up becoming more of an anchor to the player as you repeat that vicious cycle. Understandably, fast travel is not available immediately, and in order to fast travel through certain roads, you need to clear out some infestation zones that I mentioned earlier. Now, infestation zones are home to all the freakers, who are the zombies in the game if you didn't know. Some travel in hordes, but even a pack of 3 to 4 can actually be dangerous. They hit hard, swarm fast, and provide a solid challenge. Some reviewers did disagree with me, so do keep that in mind, but I didn't really have an affinity for the gunplay in Days Gone. The altering reticles, the stiffness of it, and the less than desirable stealth system made it feel like a disjointed experience. Speaking of stealth, there are stealth missions in this game where if you do get caught, you get sent to the beginning.
They're eating more than just us and each other. They're eating berries, plants, grass, needles, basically anything a deer would eat. They're omnivores, just like us, but with stomachs.
What year is this? Someone remind me, whose idea was this? Because this is not like 2012 again, man. We need to catch up with the times here. As you complete missions and kill freakers or rippers, what have you, you earn experience points and can eventually level up. You'll gain access to 3 skill trees: melee, ranged, and survival. Melee skills let your crafted melee weapons do more damage and lower stamina consumption in multiple ways on top of other things. Ranged is based around guns naturally, and survival is focused on looting, crafting, and environmental awareness. Yes, you can craft by, for example, adding nails to a melee weapon maybe, or crafting med kits, and the list goes on. It feels like this was more of an afterthought though, if I'm completely honest, because outside of bonus damage for crafted melee weapons and the skill trees, there wasn't a specific skill I was fist pumping over acquiring. So all in all, Days Gone gameplay system is just okay. Naturally, that leads us to sound. You know, if there's one thing I did love about this game, it's the dialogue. These actors may have been handed okay scripts, but the cast themselves did a good job delivering them. Sam Witwer as Deacon especially, because he brings a very natural element to the character. Throwing in some simple uhs and ums mid-sentence brings a whole world of unexpected humanization to the table, because it doesn't feel like Deacon is one of those video game characters that recites his epic monologues in the mirror every morning and doesn't stutter like the rest of us. Consider it a little detail, but I dug the hell out of that element, man. I mean, these conversations felt real and they felt believable, so kudos to the writers for creating that type of script and for the actors really reprising that and adding their own personal touches to it. Music rests in the background and nothing really caught my attention in the terms of standout tracks. In my personal opinion, I think that this is a title, given its post-apocalyptic setting, that could have benefited from a lack of sound actually. Less music, more ambient noises would have done wonders as someone who adores this genre. When it comes to effects, Melee is just lacking. It does not have that punch, and maybe I'm a bit spoiled by Mortal Kombat, but still, it doesn't have that oomph that maybe a Last of Us would have. Guns have some kick, and the bikes don't roar quite as loudly as I'd hope, but don't sound like just you going brrrr, so kudos to that. Let's wrap it all up. Days Gone is a hell of a roller coaster. It has some really good moments in the story, but between the tech issues and inconsistent wonky gameplay, this is one I ultimately have to suggest you guys and gals just grab on a sale, if at all. It's not so bad where it's an avoid at all costs, because like I said, there are some redeeming moments throughout the product, but it's definitely one you gotta wait till you're in the $20 to $30 price range, which may take some time given its exclusive nature and also how it sells. I know Sony exclusives do tend to sell very well, but this is not one that you have to rush out and rip off the store shelf. So that'll conclude my Days Gone review. Once again, a big thanks to Sony for providing the review copy. I love being able to take my time with these games, play them in a natural fashion. It leads to a better, more enjoyable review process, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you do have any questions, do fire away in the comments down below. I'll try my best to get back to you and answer as many as possible, but that'll do it for me. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that, as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.